the woman who discovered $200 million missing from EU accounts. Every month, millions of pounds, British pounds, was being siphoned off into secret bank accounts or wasted by the EU, even though the EU superstate was formed way back in the 1970s, which is a complete and utter lie. The EU superstate was 1820. Congress of Vienna. It's where the original United States name came from. But the EU did not employ a proper accountant from the 1970s, which they said was when it formed, which is, like I said, a complete and utter lie. They just changed the script a bit. From the 1970s until 2002, no accountant. A bit like the Federal Reserve, really, isn't it? Same pattern. Once you recognise the pattern, it replicates everywhere else. Now, her name was Marta Andreasen, and in January 2002 she began her new job in Brussels as the chief accountant. And she and other whistleblowers discovered that millions of pounds of British taxpayers' money was being sent into secret bank accounts and actually disappearing. And what's more, when the EU Commissioner Neil Kinnock, who was Vice President of the EU, was told, the whistleblowers were smeared, suspended and then fired from their jobs. No surprise there. Now, the EU's budget is £360 million, which is roughly $475 million per day. What for? And the EU has destroyed trade by enforcing rigid, complicated and overly huge VAT taxes. This is the EU version of sales tax for Americans. Now, VAT has risen in Britain from 17.5% to now nearly 30%. Yeah, 30% sales tax in the UK. And most of that cash is siphoned into secret EU bank accounts, which are exposed as far back as 2001. But then, in a complex cat and mouse game with Commissioner Neil Kinnock, whitewashed the mainstream press interest in the matter, and the BBC, no surprise there, never dared to mention these secret bank accounts, nor the EU's number-crunching watchdog Eurostat, which is at the centre of one of the scams which has seen millions go missing. Now, Marta Andreasen was hired as the EU's first proper chief accountant, and she was in charge of 130 staff, and surprisingly was the first properly qualified accountant to hold the post. And she did all her job correctly, to the letter of the law. Except these clowns don't apply to the law, do they? As we've all found out. And in no time at all, she identified that £170 million, which is around $220 million, was missing or unaccounted for in the EU budget. And the corrupt EU immediately slapped her with a disciplinary charge for defamation, and she was suspended from her job. Now, that's what happens when you expose a crime. She refused to ratify the European Commission accounts, and this means that the massive £143 billion per year budget was not accounted for in its entirety. £143 billion, $170 billion per year, and none of it was accounted for. She also found that many millions were missing or not properly recorded, and Andreasen went public with her concerns back in August of 2002 and subsequently caught massive public support, and the EU treated her unfairly. Instead of investigating the secret bank accounts and missing millions, they just fired her. And she was fully suspended from her job by the Commission in May of 2002 for violating Articles 12 and 21 of staff regulations, failure to show sufficient loyalty and respect to EU bosses. Unbelievable. But actually, she did show loyalty and respect, loyalty to the truth and respect for the taxpayer who had been fleeced and defrauded for decades by the EU. And the EU's secret bank accounts have never, even to this day, still been properly investigated. Some that were set up by employees of Eurostat, which laughably is meant to be the statistical watchdog of the EU. It's a bit like the Ernst & Young earlier, isn't it? Our own investigators investigate nothing. Eurostat allegedly used a double accounting system, that's the mirror system, which we've been talking about, that was installed in the Treasury, to transfer large amounts of money to secret bank accounts not monitored by the auditors. And between 4 and 5 million euros was thought to have been siphoned off, mostly between 1996 and 2001, an average of around $1 million per year disappearing without trace. And that is just one department at the EU. And subsequently, not a single person was fired from Eurostat. In fact, they carry on operating business as usual, knowing full well that EU politicians are immune to prosecution. Again, you understand the issues of arresting the higher profile clowns. They've wrapped themselves in legalese babble and are immune from prosecution in many cases. That has to be changed before you can drag these people in. Now, the incompetence of Eurostat is staggering, and in 2002 it produced a map of the EU which didn't even include the country of Wales, and the Eurostat scandal ran for years. Now, in 2001, a lady statistician stumbled on the multi-million-dollar Eurostat scam, which again involves secret accounts in, go figure, Luxembourg. No surprise, Luxembourg, Belgium, both were regions of Holland. I've covered that country and its role many times now. Holland got broken up and parts of it merged into Luxembourg and parts of it merged into Belgium. This is why they changed the names around so people forget, well, so they think anyway. A bit like Tartaria, never existed, really. But Ms. Dorte Schmidt-Brown, a Dane who had worked at Eurostat since 1993, whistle blew that there were several suspicious contracts. Some have been awarded on the basis of nepotism, and payments have been made for work that was never even carried out. Sounds like FEMA. She pointed out to Neil Kinnock that more than $1 million worth of research work was given to Eurogram, a London-based company run by Edward Ojo, a former Commission employee. And the Welsh Mr. Kinnock is thought to have sniffed around the $1 million scandal, but he was allegedly scared off with the famous Eurostat map being published thereafter, which left Wales, who Mr. Kinnock is from, off the map. Ms. Brown was intimidated into taking sick leave and says she felt threatened and beleaguered, and hardly no official EU employee championed her expose of the Eurostat scandal, and none of the Smith-Brown allegations have ever been disproven. In fact, it's the tip of a giant fraud iceberg. She now lives on a €35,000 a year invalidity pension, which is 3 times what a disabled person gets. And she did, however, receive a public apology from Neil Kinnock from the Commission's handling of her complaint, and the statement from Kinnock proves that many millions have been defrauded by EU employees, and that the Eurostat scam may still be ongoing. No one knows for sure. We do, because it is. and it's wrapped into the being funneled money into NATO to supply more missiles to irritate Russia and escalate a fake Cold War.